there is a change, like we were saying, to basically rope dropping at Magic Kingdom, and that Tron is now standby queue. They dropped the virtual queue, and now it's just regular standby.
Yeah, we got regular standby, and we've got single pass lightning lane are now the options for Tron. And so it started on Monday. It was the first day they started doing this standby queue. And it's interesting because the wait times have not been that bad. I was thinking, oh, you never know, because it's been open for over a year. I think opened in April of 23, I believe. So it's been open for a while, and testing this new standby queue is kind of curious to see like how the crowds would be, how the wait times would be, and how other rides would be affected.
Yeah.
So the average wait time on Monday was about 60 minutes, and that's the first day. So I feel like that's a good number.
That's not a I mean, for a I'd say brand new. It's like the newest ride in Magic Kingdom. That's not a terrible amount of time to wait. Granted, the crowds aren't really heavy right now either.
Right. But the other thing that's interesting is that other rides like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train saw lower waits because I think it's pulling people from Seven Dwarfs to Tron now.
Right, because that's what we're saying, rope dropping. Most people were rope dropping Seven Dwarfs, so now a lot of people are rope dropping Tron,
right,
and splitting it, which is why I guess this is a better discussion of, personally, I've thought this for a while, but I think virtual queues do more harm than good in terms of like guest experience for this very reason, in that it impacts other rides so much. So now that you have Tron, just regular standby, you'll basically see a bunch of lower wait times and things around it, or maybe even around a lot of the park, because a lot of people now the standby line at Tron is going to eat up a lot of those crowds. That
is true. Now, something to remember, though, is that Tron is not open for early entry.
Right. It's not.
So it's just the beginning of the day, like when regular park guests can go in.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'm not sure why. But, I mean, like, why would they?
I don't know.
They're just waiting on that?
Unless it's something to do with ride testing in the mornings or something like that.
Maybe.
I don't know. But,
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we've talked about at length, and we'll have another topic here to talk about this very thing about, like, Disney Vacation requiring you to be on your phone so much. And I think virtual queues are one of those things, like, they changed Genie Plus where you didn't have to buy it first thing in the morning. You could buy it ahead of time, which helps with that. But I think the other thing, too, is having the virtual queue. There's, it's better than it used to be in terms of, you remember this, to have virtual queue for Rise of the Resistance. You used to have to go into the park to be able to try to get on it.
I remember.
And then you would see people in the park either being like, yes, or and people just leaving en masse. So that is a worse way to start your day, which getting up first thing in the morning to try and get a boarding group to ride a ride you want to ride. And if you don't get it, then your only other shot would be like 1 o'clock drop. So I think most people, and I'm speaking for myself and most people I've talked to, would much rather just take their chances on a longer line to wait in line for it. I know I would. I would much rather be like, you know what? I'll just get up there, and if it's a ride I really want to ride, I'll wait an hour. It's like Hagrid's at Universal. It's like, it's rare if you're going to find that ride under an hour. So you're like, that's fine. I want to ride this. I'm willing to wait. And I think most people, especially if you're like infrequent, like it's a really ride you want to ride, I think most people would be, I'm okay with that. They're like, I'll wait in line for this ride that I want to ride versus essentially a lottery on your phone first thing in the morning.
Well, what's interesting, a couple of factors here that is something to think about. With a virtual queue, with Tron especially, you would be called for your boarding group and still have to wait.
Right.
Like 45 minutes or however long it was.
I mean, sometimes it's like an hour.
So, I mean, like, you're still waiting as if you were waiting in standby. It's just they're calling you to do it. Another thing with virtual queue and Tron especially, that is not the same as what we see of like Cosmic Rewind, is that they're sticklers for your return time.
Right.
So if it's not convenient to you to get that virtual queue boarding group, then again, you're just going to be like scrambling to try to get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that doesn't work out. So there's another factor against it. Another thing is that having a virtual queue for Tron and Tiana's at the same park was a little confusing for people because you couldn't hold both at the same time.
Right.
So if you did want to do Tiana's and Tron, you would have to do one, at 7 o'clock and one at 1 o'clock. Yeah. Basically. That was the only way to do it unless you got Genie Plus for Tiana's you could get the one for Tron. Like it was just kind of like okay, what are we going to do here? But so you don't have to worry about that now. And you don't have to worry about, getting into your boarding group and everything. So there's a lot of good things about being standby. I think there's more good than not.
I agree. I mean, I think that I think you're seeing that with most people, it just complicates the trip. And again, it's like it's like first thing in the morning, like you were saying, let's say your boarding group gets called and you've got a reservation somewhere or you've got something else. So it's like, as much as they're hoping to allow you to, like with, what used to be Fast Pass, now it's this Lightning Lane Multi-Pass of sort of planning out your days. There's still that stuck in the middle of it, which could just be, oh, you got the first thing boarding group. We didn't want a rope drop. Now we have to. Or it's like you get it late at night sort of thing. So it's like you can't really still plan your day. And again, if it's me, I'm like, if I really want to ride it, I'll wait an hour. I would rather just be able to do it at my leisure. And I think most people feel that way. Now, I see the merits of boarding groups at times, especially with rides that shut down a lot. Rides of the Resistance did it. Tiana's can't stay open half the time, so they're doing it that way.
Yeah, but Tron hasn't needed it for a while.
Agreed. And I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy need it. I don't think that's one that needs it.
That one's interesting. Someone was, it was my mom actually. She was kind of saying like, well, I think Cosmic Rewind still needs it because they'll be calling for boarding group and I still have to wait like an hour or whatever. I'm like, well, it depends on when you go because right in the middle of in the early in the morning, like if you're one of the first to get called in like an hour, you just kind of go right through.
Yeah.
Same thing at the end of the day. A lot of people will go toward the middle of the day, and again, they're very lax with return times.
So I said they're not very strict there as much as they are on Tron,
and that's why it gets bogged down.
Yeah,
it's because people are just coming whenever they want. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I think getting rid of the boarding groups for Cosmic Rewind will have the same effect as it does for like Tron, whereas you're waiting in the line anyway. So why not just let people wait whenever they want?
Right. I agree. That's the thing. Yeah. It's not like with boarding groups that your boarding group is called and you just walk right on. Right. You're still waiting all this time. So it really doesn't alleviate that whole fact, the fact of that matter anyways.
Yeah.
Plus, like you were saying, if they dropped it at Cosmic Rewind, I think very likely you would see wait times for Frozen drop, for Ratatouille drop. Like these are the things,
Ratatouille
especially now with Epcot, it doesn't. I mean, you've got Test Track down. Like, there's not as much stuff to do there. Yep. So, all in all, I just think that for the most part, virtual queues don't serve the purpose of what. Like, I understand from Disney's perspective of like their thinking behind it, as they're like, well, instead of standing in line, you're doing other things, but it doesn't account for the fact of the standby lines that affects everywhere else and everything like that. So, I just think. And the main thing, too, it simplifies a trip by not having to use it all the time. I think most people would just rather not have to deal with it.
Yep.
Because there's nothing worse than waking up first thing in the morning and just being either like you're just disappointed you didn't get to, you know what I mean?
Well,
like right off the bat.
Ruins my day.
Yeah, and it's like in your best bet, again, it puts all this pressure on like a 1 o'clock drop and just, I don't know. I've never been a fan of it, but hopefully we'll see it kind of become less and less frequently used, but we'll have to wait and see on that.